Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today we come to the end of June and the beginning of July, so I want to do the usual wrap-up and TBR. And I think that in June I had a lot of great reads. There was a period where I was reading like banger after banger after banger, or a couple of good books in a row, as I would say. So much different than the rest of the year, I would think. Although in the other parts of the year there were some fascinating reads as well. But I do think some potential year-end contenders are situated in this month, and I'm very happy about that. But what also happened in June, I took a vacation, and it was a lot of fun. I went to Toronto, never really left the country before, but I had a good time. I went to a bookstore, and I'll talk more about what books I got when in just a few moments, or right now actually, which is I got 3 books. One called The Toronto Book of the Dead, which is about death in Toronto. That Night in the Library, which is a murder mystery that takes place in the library. Very interesting. And then The Road by Cormac McCarthy. If you've been watching this channel for a little bit, you know I like Cormac McCarthy. And I've been meaning to read The Road, as I view it as sort of like the end of a trilogy of books with Blood Meridian, No Country for Old Men, and this The Road, which I'm sure Cormac McCarthy didn't intend, but the themes all seem pretty similar, or at least the theme that I think The Road is going to have seems similar to the other ones. Well, that'll remain to be seen, but hopefully it's a high quality book. And yeah, so I had a good time in Toronto. I didn't read as much because of that, but it's always good to get a little bit of a vacation from reading and just clearing your mind and such. But without further ado, let's do the usual wrap-up and TBR, and we will move on from there. So what books are graphic novels, manga, what did I read in June? In terms of books, I read Vagabond, which was a manga. I thought it was a lot of fun. Certainly not the most intriguing manga that I've read, but I'd say it lies somewhere between Spy Family on the lower side and Berserk on the higher side. I don't think anything will ever surpass Berserk, and if it does, that probably means great things for that piece of media. But Vagabond was still an interesting sort of samurai story, and I recommend that. I also read The Very Nice Box, which was by 2 authors, which I've never encountered like a book written by 2 different people before. But I thought it was good. It had a bit of a strange ending that I feel undermines the story a bit, makes it come off as more funny than it should be, because it was about like a woman whose like fiance and parents died in a car crash, having a hard time getting back into love, finally finding someone that she could be with, but him turning out to be someone who, wasn't who he said he was, and like, I think that's an interesting idea, but the way that it's executed is very weird because, spoiler alert, it turns out that he was the one who killed her parents in a drunk driving accident. And I feel like that's the second time that's happened in a story, and it's not true to how real life would play out. If you kill someone, even by accident, you're not going to try to maneuver your way back into someone's life to seek forgiveness. Or maybe you will, but I feel like that's, for the most part, people leave. They run away when they do bad things, and if it's someone you knew before the accident, you might seek forgiveness, but I doubt that that person in that story would have done that. So it feels a little less authentic, and the story suffers as a result. I also read Avery, which was a graphic novel about a ranking system that affects human beings in the near future. I thought it was interesting, but it does come off as a bit Black Mirror-like. I think maybe it probably came out before the Black Mirror episode that I'm thinking of in particular. And it was fun, but ultimately not something I wanted to, or I feel like I'm going to think about in the future. I also read The Lost Boy. It was another graphic novel, mostly boring, taking place in the past and the future about a missing child. Didn't really care for it. It tried to be Sandman-esque, I would say, or it tried to utilize Neil Gaiman type of writing. But if you're not Neil Gaiman, it's not going to be very effective. I also read The Crow by James O'Barr, which I thought was good. Really fun, interesting sort of exploration of grief and revenge and those kinds of things. I thought the art was pretty dandy, but I do have to say I think I like the movie more than the graphic novel. I think the movie plays on the themes that the graphic novel has very well, and it feels more realized than the graphic novel. Not to say the graphic novel is bad. It's just the movie kind of perfects it in a way that makes the graphic novel feel less lesser a little bit. But again, comparing it against what Brandon Lee does in The Crow, it is a bit unfair, but I just wanted to note that there. I also read Berserk Volume 10 by Kentaro Miura, which I thought was great. A very strong sort of addition volume of the series. It keeps getting better and better, which I say every time I read the next volume. But yeah, a lot of very interesting sort of things about guts and love triangles and finding meaning in the world. So definitely recommend it if you haven't already pursued the Berserk series. And then I also read Butcher's Crossing by John Williams, probably the best of the month, and also very harrowing because of the being trapped in nature and just being on the verge of death and trying to survive. I like what John Williams has to say about trying to find that meaning in nature, and ultimately there might not really be anything there, and how it devastates the characters in the story. His writing can be a bit overbearing at times, but if you invest in it, I feel like John Williams really knocks it out of the park. He did the same with Augustus a little bit, and what was the other one? Stoner, which is probably one of the best books of all time. Definitely check out the video I made because I go into a lot more detail, but I strongly recommend it because it is a fascinating exploration, a very epic type story, I would say. I also read a number of short stories, including The Terrapin, which was good, but a little bit of sad, dealt with family abuse there. The Caterpillar, which was good. The Water That Falls on You from Nowhere is probably one of the better short stories that I've read. An exploration of science fiction with water falling on you as you lie, and exploring a gay relationship, and also coming out to your parents. A lot of interesting sort of things there, and ultimately how the idea that if you're sure your loved ones are what matter most to you, and if your family doesn't accept you for your gay identity, you can move beyond that maybe, but it also sucks because your family has been there for you for a while, and so if you just cut contact with them, it's not going to be great. It's not going to be ideal. And I think John Chu, who wrote that, did a really good job of exploring that kind of mindset there. And then I also read a number of poems for the month of June, which were by LGBT writers, as I am in this period of Pride, going from the end of May to the end of July. Lots of fun. Definitely good to explore LGBT writers, not just in June, but even though that was June that I explored them. But I'm going to continue to explore these writers in July as well. And I'm also searching for not so oppressive poems that get at the complete LGBT experience, because again, if you just talk about downer poems, it kind of gives you the belief that all LGBT poems have to be downers, but there's a variety of experience there, which I hope to find. But what do I intend to read in July? What is on my TBR? I have a lot of books planned, including Mercury by Hope Larson, The Last Time I Died, which I got from my local library, A Bond Undone by Jin Young, I believe it is. It's a second book in the Legend of the Condor Heroes series. I took it with me when I went to Toronto, and I intended to read it on the flight, but I wasn't really feeling it, so I only got through one chapter of it. But still very much looking forward to it in the next week or so. The Toronto Book of the Dead, as I mentioned before. I'll try to get to the other books, but those will probably be spaced out a bit longer. Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, which I got, I think, in San Francisco when I went to a bookstore there. I've read the War and Peace book by Leo Tolstoy earlier this year, and I've always sort of lumped that book with Crime and Punishment in my mind because they're both by Russian writers. It might be that they're completely different, but something tells me they're probably not. So I'm looking forward to that in July or maybe August if I don't get to it. And then, of course, the usual library reads. Don't forget to patronize your local library. I also have a number of short stories planned, including one by Daniel Orozco. Vladimir Nabokov, I read Lolita before, but I'm interested in seeing what he says in his short stories. Franz Kafka, which I'm surprised I actually haven't read anything by Kafka yet, given his notoriety in literature circles. But it's time to read a little bit of Kafka, and then a short story by Ann Beattie, who I only know because I typed in women short story writers into Google, and her name is one that popped up. Is it kind of sexist to type that into Google? Maybe a little bit, but it's also very difficult to find women writers unless you intentionally seek them out in that way. So I feel I'm justified in some sense there. And then, of course, I have a number of poems planned for the month of July, again by LGBT writers, so be on the lookout for that. Anyway, that was my wrap-up and TBR for June and July, respectively. If you got any recommendations, let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear from you, or just have a discussion about what I read or what I plan on reading. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this channel if they do not already know, or some of the books that I've listed here. But until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and July-based travels. Farewell.